Let me tell you something I learned after decades of watching souls crack open like eggs. Most of what you've been told about spiritual awakening is a pleasant fiction designed to keep you asleep. They've sold you a sanitized version, haven't they? A gentle unfolding, a peaceful integration, a journey toward wholeness that somehow never demands you actually break into pieces first. I spent my life mapping the territory of the unconscious, and I can assure you the path to individuation is less like a walk through a garden and more like voluntary dismemberment. Few survive it intact, fewer still complete the journey. Not because they lack intelligence or courage, but because true awakening requires a sacrifice that most people, when they finally understand what's being asked, simply refuse to make. So I ask you now, with all the directness I can muster, which stage of this magnificent catastrophe are you actually in? Because what I'm about to share isn't theory from my consulting room. It's the living map drawn in the blood and tears of those who dared to become conscious. And it might destroy every comfortable illusion you've built about your spiritual progress. It begins, innocently enough, a dream that won't leave you alone. A synchronicity so precise it stops your breath, a sudden, inexplicable dissatisfaction with the life you've carefully constructed. You look around at your achievements, your relationships, your perfectly reasonable existence, and something inside you screams that this cannot be all there is. I call this the activation of the self, that central organizing principle that has been waiting patiently for you to remember it exists. But here's what nobody tells you. The self doesn't call you toward comfort. It calls you toward wholeness, and wholeness includes every shadow, every denied aspect, every rejected fragment of yourself you've spent decades trying to forget. Most people mistake this call for a midlife crisis or temporary depression. They change jobs, leave marriages, buy sports cars, anything to quiet that insistent voice. But you can't negotiate with the self. Once it's activated, you have only two choices: answer the call or spend the rest of your life running from it. Then you meet what I've come to call your shadow, and the real horror begins. Everything you believed yourself not to be, everything you've projected onto others, every ugly impulse you've denied comes crawling out of the darkness to introduce itself. You discover rage you didn't know you had, jealousy that shames you, desires that violate every value you thought you held. This isn't metaphorical. You'll find yourself acting in ways that seem impossible for someone like you. The good person discovers their capacity for cruelty. The rational individual becomes inexplicably irrational. The spiritual seeker finds themselves drowning in materialism or lust or pettiness. Your first instinct is to stuff it all back down, to reassert control, to return to your previous self-image. But the shadow, once acknowledged, cannot be ignored. It will sabotage your relationships, undermine your ambitions, and haunt your dreams until you finally turn around and face it. And most people simply cannot bear to see themselves this clearly. They retreat into denial and never progress beyond this stage. Just when you think you've made peace with your darkness, your carefully constructed persona, that social mask you've worn so long you mistook it for your face, begins to crack. The professional identity you've cultivated, the family role you've played, the spiritual seeker persona you've adopted, all of it revealed as costume, as performance, as elaborate self-deception. You start to notice how much energy you spend maintaining these masks, how exhausting it is to be the person everyone expects, how little of what you call yourself is actually authentic. This recognition is devastating because you've invested everything in these identities. Without them, who are you? I've watched people completely unravel at this stage. The successful executive realizes their ambition was their father's dream, not their own. The devoted spouse discovers they've been playing a role rather than loving authentically. The spiritual teacher sees their teachings as just another ego game. The ground falls away completely. Then comes the encounter. Men meet their anima, that unconscious feminine aspect they've repressed. Women confront their animus, the masculine principle they've denied. But this isn't some gentle integration. It's a full-scale assault on your sense of gender identity and psychological balance. You might become inexplicably attracted to someone who represents this hidden aspect, or you might find yourself acting out qualities you've always rejected. The strong man becomes emotionally vulnerable in ways that terrify him. The nurturing woman discovers her capacity for ruthless action. This contrasexual element doesn't ask permission to emerge, it erupts. Most people project this inner figure onto external relationships, creating impossible romantic entanglements or pursuing unavailable partners. They're trying to find outside themselves what can only be integrated within. The marriages that explode during spiritual awakening often have their roots here. You're not actually leaving your partner. You're trying to escape the confrontation with your own disowned psychological territory. But the psyche is cunning beyond measure. If you survive the first 4 stages, the ego performs its most sophisticated trick yet. It inflates. Suddenly, you're not just having a spiritual experience, you're special, chosen, more conscious than others. You've discovered what the masses cannot see. I've seen this destroy more seekers than any other stage. They emerge from their dark night convinced they're now enlightened. They speak in absolutes about consciousness and enlightenment. They see through everyone else's illusions while remaining completely blind to how their ego has simply colonized their spiritual insights. This inflated state feels glorious. You've read the texts, understood the symbols, experienced the numinous, but you've made the fatal error of identifying with the archetypal rather than relating to it. You've confused touching the divine with being the divine. And this confusion can last years, even decades, making you insufferable to be around while you remain convinced of your own awakening. The psyche, in its infinite wisdom, eventually shatters this inflation through what I call psychological dismemberment. Everything you thought you'd achieved falls apart. The spiritual insights that seemed so solid reveal themselves as temporary. The certainty crumbles. The new identity you'd constructed from your experiences fragments just as surely as your old persona did. This is different from the earlier stages. This is the systematic deconstruction of every gain you thought you'd made. You don't just doubt your progress, you begin to suspect the entire journey was delusion. Every insight becomes suspect. Every experience seems like self-deception. You're torn apart at a fundamental level. I watched this happen to myself during my own confrontation with the unconscious. For years, I couldn't distinguish between genuine insight and madness. The material from the collective unconscious flooded my consciousness with such force that my rational mind couldn't contain it. Many don't survive this intact. They fragment permanently, unable to reassemble the pieces. In mythology, the hero is swallowed by the whale and descends into the depths. In psychological terms, you're pulled down into the unconscious so completely that all landmarks disappear. This is the true dark night, and it makes your earlier difficulties seem like child's play. There's no you left to have the experience. There's only the experience itself, and it's one of absolute dissolution. Time loses meaning. Your former life seems like a dream. You can't remember why anything mattered or who you thought you were. This isn't depression. Depression still has a self that suffers. This is the absence of that self entirely. You're adrift in the collective unconscious with nothing to hold on to. Some people physically withdraw at this stage. They can't maintain normal life because there's no one home to maintain it. I've known seekers who lost years to this descent, unable to work, to relate, to function. The psychiatrists call it psychosis, but it's something far more profound. It's the ego's complete dissolution before the self can emerge. Eventually, if you're fortunate, something in the psyche reaches for wholeness. I call this the transcendent function. That remarkable capacity for consciousness to bridge opposites and create new synthesis. But here's what I discovered that nobody wants to hear. It fails repeatedly, catastrophically. Your attempts at integration collapse under their own weight. You try to hold the tension of opposites, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, masculine and feminine. But the psyche isn't ready. The container isn't strong enough. Every time you think you've achieved integration, it fragments again. You're Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the mountain, except the mountain is your own fragmented consciousness. This stage can break your spirit entirely. You've done everything right. You've faced your shadow, shattered your persona, survived the descent, but integration keeps slipping through your fingers like water. Many give up here, exhausted by the endless cycles of dissolution and attempted reconstruction. They settle for functional neurosis rather than continue this torturous process. But something shifts if you persist, not because you've gotten stronger, but because you've finally weakened enough to stop interfering with the process. You begin to understand that integration isn't something you do. It's something that happens when you finally surrender the need to control the outcome. The transcendent function doesn't work through your will. It works through your acceptance. You start holding contradictions without needing to resolve them. You're both everything and nothing, both whole and fragmented, both conscious and unconscious. The rational mind screams that this is impossible, but something deeper recognizes it as true. This is the beginning of what I call the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites within the psyche. Yet this stage is maddening in its own way. You can't explain it to anyone. The moment you try to articulate the integration, it dissolves. It exists only in the living experience, never in the conceptual understanding. You're learning a language that has no words, navigating by a compass that points in all directions simultaneously. And then without announcement or fanfare, the self that was always there reveals itself fully, not as an achievement of yours, but as what you've always been beneath the layers of identification. You recognize that everything, every stage, every suffering, every dissolution was this self knowing itself through the elaborate fiction of being you. This isn't enlightenment in the way spiritual teachers describe it. There's no permanent bliss state, no final understanding, no certificate of completion. Instead, there's a profound ordinariness to it. Life continues with all its challenges and contradictions, but there's no longer anyone claiming ownership of the experience. The ego has become transparent to the self. What remains is a kind of benevolent witnessing. You watch your personality continue to function, your preferences continue to exist, your story continue to unfold, but without the desperate identification that once characterized everything. You're simultaneously no one in particular and the totality itself. The personal and the transpersonal dance together without conflict. I've come to understand this as the true sacred marriage, not between people but within the psyche itself. Every split aspect finds its counterpart. Masculine and feminine, consciousness and unconsciousness, spirit and matter, all merge into dynamic wholeness. But this isn't static unity, it's living, breathing, constantly shifting integration. You discover that individuation doesn't mean becoming separate or special. It means becoming so completely yourself that the boundaries between self and world begin to blur. You're utterly unique and simultaneously participating in something universal. The more individual you become, the more connected to everything you feel. It's the ultimate paradox, and it can only be lived, never explained. This stage brings a profound creative capacity, not because you're trying to create, but because creation flows naturally from integrated consciousness. You become a conduit for what wants to emerge from the collective unconscious, but you don't take credit for it. It's happening through you, not by you. Finally, you return to the ordinary world, except you never actually left. This is the cosmic joke I've been trying to articulate for decades. All those stages, all that suffering, all that transformation, and here you are back in consensus reality, washing dishes, paying bills, living an apparently normal life. But everything has changed because nothing has changed. You realize the journey was necessary to discover what was always already present. The self didn't emerge through your efforts. It was patiently waiting for you to stop obscuring it with all your seeking. Consciousness doesn't evolve towards something. It simply recognizes what it's always been. And in that recognition, the entire drama of spiritual awakening reveals itself as consciousness playing hide and seek with itself. This is where true compassion is born. Not from spiritual superiority, but from recognizing that everyone is in one of these stages, struggling with the same archetypal journey, wearing different costumes. The suffering you endured, they're enduring. The stages you survived, they're navigating. There's no one further along, no one more awakened. There's only consciousness exploring its own nature through billions of unique perspectives. Now, having walked you through these 12 stations of psychological death and rebirth, I must confess something. The stages aren't sequential. They're not a ladder you climb or a curriculum you complete. They're movements in an eternal dance that consciousness performs with itself. You might experience the night sea journey on Monday, inflation on Tuesday, and integration by Wednesday, only to find yourself dismembered again by Thursday. The real awakening is recognizing that there's no destination, no final stage, no ultimate achievement. Even this recognition can become another trap if you try to possess it. What I've shared with you isn't meant to discourage you from the path of individuation. It's meant to liberate you from the fantasy that becoming conscious is comfortable, predictable, or ever complete. When you stop trying to figure out which stage you're in, when you stop trying to progress to the next level, something remarkable happens. You discover that the consciousness observing all these stages was never caught in them. The self that witnesses your confusion isn't confused. The awareness that experiences dismemberment cannot be dismembered. So here's what I've learned after a lifetime of exploring the psyche's depths. The path isn't about becoming someone special or achieving some elevated state. It's about recognizing that the one trying to become awakened is exactly what needs to be seen through. And what survives that seeing? Nothing personal, everything essential. The self was always here, patiently waiting beneath your seeking, beneath your suffering, beneath every stage and every identity. You are that self right now, reading these words, perhaps recognizing yourself in this mirror I've held up, not as achievement, not as attainment, but as the most natural thing in the world. Welcome home to what you never left. The journey was necessary to discover it was always unnecessary. And in that cosmic joke, in that ultimate paradox, lies the only freedom consciousness has ever known.